So we, unlike retail, we don't rely on other people to manufacture our products. So in the U.S., we do a lot of manufacturing for the modular carpet business in Georgia, Interface Floor. We have another manufacturing plant in the LA area for Bentley Print Street, which is another one of our businesses. And then we have global manufacturing in Thailand. We just recently opened a factory in China. And it's incredibly decentralized, so a lot of the training, sustainability, a lot of the things we do with our people are definitely at the plant level. Now the challenge is for a company like ours who's so used to sort of the positive side of sustainability, I'll admit that we don't have a fabulous system in place for what would happen if we had something like this, if we had a disaster. And I think that's a huge sort of area of blind spot for Interface because nobody plans for that on a proactive basis. I mean, certainly there's ways that you can have sort of disaster planning and communications and marketing, but an interesting thing for us is that up until 2 years ago, we didn't even have a chief marketing officer. So we find ourselves, not unlike a lot of manufacturing businesses who are riding this great wave of, I think, a wonderful reputation around sustainability and a very proactive way that we're sort of reporting the positives, but we have a huge blind spot in terms of what would happen if we were faced with one of these issues. Similarly, if a blogger were to start saying, I don't think Interface has a fabulous reputation, or were to put something out there that were hugely negative, we've almost lived under this sort of halo effect because of Reg. I think it would be a challenge for us.
It would be a challenge for everybody. Let's go to you, Anthony Holm, our government guy. I don't mean to beat a burning horse here, but let's stay with this factory fire analogy in Bangladesh. I understand from Marcel Manubens, who's the EVP of Human Rights at PVH, Phil Van Heusen, that the Bangladeshi government is so corrupt and ineffectual that the apparel manufacturers who contract with factories there are trying to create a quasi-governmental self-insurance fund that polices the factories and pays victims of potential disasters from a common insurance fund created by the manufacturers. Now, in your experience, Anthony Holm, is industry self-regulation for environmental, social responsibility, and human rights a good idea or a good bet in this case, or is it just doomed to fail?
Wow, lots of questions wrapped in there also. The first thing that jumps out at me on that in response is, why are these businesses trying to do it? We may all be shocked by asking that question, but morally we probably believe that they should. But again, they're in Bangladesh for cheap labor, probably zero liability laws, and we have an ineffectual government to enforce some type of behavior on the corporations on the front side. That was implicit in the premise. So I'm sitting here hearing that question going, why are they doing this? Acting on their own. Do they believe the state is going to come in there and enforce them? And that's really perhaps, or they're going to get such bad publicity that it is better to get in front of it and say that they're overperforming relative to that jurisdiction and its laws or lack of laws. And this all leads me right to the second one. So the question, will they self-regulate? Is it effective? Yes and no. Yes, because we have lots of historical examples of eventually that occurring. For example, the U.S. child labor laws. It took 30 or 40 years of having children who were 10 years old working in our factories here and having tremendous injuries. In fact, their little fingers were sought after for this type of production before we got child labor laws. We used to have 67-day work weeks, pretty common, but in 30 or 40 years of that unionization, we have a 5-day work week. So usually the market will sort itself out, but it might take 50 years of buildings burning down. So that leads me to my no. Generally, I'm going to say that's unacceptable, and we as humans don't want that. So now we go into the second or third part, perhaps, of wrapping it up. We have a lot of models for industries getting together, having a common fund to protect either financially or otherwise. The national asbestos effort, the tobacco settlements, all those funds came on a state by state. So they can be effective, but that is usually a function of enforceability. So how does one enforce that? So let's say Van Heusen and all these companies put in a little bit of money. How is it enforced if someone claims that they're injured? If someone's dead, it's probably pretty obvious, but what if they're injured? Who gets to enforce it? Who makes them pay, and who makes them pay a fair amount? There are a few general groups who do that. One is government or the state. Two are the people working there. And then three, the media or the press for exposure. This is too theoretical. I see people kind of, am I making sense?
Well, the insurance companies would say that a dead guy's worth X thousands of dollars.
Well, we're
And
assuming
a
we
leg
have
is worth,
insurance companies in Bangladesh.
$14,550.
We're assuming we have insurance companies and the ability to go and sue them. I don't know if Bangladesh has that. That's probably why we're over there, creating clothing in that factory.
Well, it's true. So Greg Janicek, supply chain question here. Self-regulation, does that work in industries, or is it just?
I mean, work is a broad question. It works to the degree that companies will do what it takes to keep supply costs down. Okay, until we as consumers start putting pressure on companies to be more aware and to do the right thing, but we don't do it. I mean, perfect example, how many people in here own an anything? Phone, pad, you name it.
Well, this is definitely an geek group.
How many people in here own the Microsoft phone? 0. Wow. Okay, so Microsoft gives hundreds of millions of dollars a year to philanthropy.
They're also sponsoring this event, I see.
They're sponsoring this event. Apple gives 0, haven't for 14 years. So are we making our decisions based on what's convenient for us or based on how the company's behaving?
And ultimately, look, we are, as consumers, are the ones who are going to drive the outcome and be the most efficient and effective. I'm an anti-government guy, but I'm going to sit here and talk about OSHA. One of the reasons we are having factories in Bangladesh is because labor is inexpensive, production is really inexpensive. You can build and capitalize your company, and you don't have OSHA. You don't have the compliance costs. Who knows if they even had a fire retardant system or a sprinkler system in that place? I mean, we just don't know. So I don't have a lot of faith in groups to self-regulate.
There we go. Let's go for a lightning round question for all of our panelists. We're going to start with you, Philip Winterburn from Ribbon Software. It's your chance to give the audience the most valuable idea they've heard here at South by Southwest. Now, if you had to put one incentive, we'll start with you, Philip, one incentive in place for U.S. companies to report more thoroughly on sustainability, what would it be? One incentive.
I'm going to cheat. As Greg said earlier, companies are made up of people, and we have human conditions that we know are flawed. And companies are driven by profit. And so I think the time for incentives is past, and it's now time for mandates. So I think that one incentive I would like to see would be a federal mandate for some level of standardized sustainability indicator reporting. I think that's how you make the change in a timely fashion.
Anthony Holm, do you agree? Is that the one thing you'd suggest?
I think that would be incredibly powerful because then we could judge side by side these companies. But no, I'm going to suggest something else. May or may not be as effective. There are enough people engaged in this and desiring this outcome. You all could create your own mutual fund. Everybody in here probably has a 401k. Put your money into a singular fund and put it behind publicly traded companies that A, give you this type of information, and B, you believe in. And then go out there and broadcast it. How many bloggers are here? I mean, go and self-perpetuate that. Create personal value in your investments and help that company. And the market will respond. They will want you as investors. It's the most entrepreneurial application. May not be the most effective. What he said might be the most effective, but I'm going another way.
Okay, Greg Janicek, we've got one vote for the law, we got one vote for money. What about you?
I mean, regulation would definitely do it right. If it's out there, you have to do it as an organization. However, there's a lot of laws already driving people out of California and out of the United States to other countries, which is unfortunate. For our kids who have this big debt burden that we're going through, a different subject. I'd like to see what I saw. When I first got out of college, it was all about quality. Quality control was the thing. And all these consulting companies started putting together businesses around that, and eventually started comparing one peer versus the other on how they do with quality. And then it was internet, now it's social media networking and that kind of thing. So there's always something there. I'd like to see organizations start comparing the Apple to the HP to the Dell and people in that discrete peering group against each other. The hard part will be understanding the variables that go into it that says you're doing good or you're doing bad. But if we can come to some consensus around that, around a small group of competitors, I think that will help drive awareness as well as help drive companies making decisions.
How about you, Aaron Mizan? What's your weapon?
I mean,